What's up? This is Alaric Moses Ong, and today I'm here with Nick Bradley. He's the host of the UK's #1 business podcast, SUYB, Scale Up Your Business, and Scaling Fanatic, and he has done 24 successful exits. He helps entrepreneurs and investors build empires by buying, scaling, and selling businesses. So welcome to the show, Nick.
Hey, Alaric, it's great to be here today. Thank you for having me on the show.
Great, Nick. Maybe you can share more about like your entrepreneurship journey and what you do from day to day, and we can go.
Oh yeah, man, I can get into that. So I'll give you I'll give you the short version of a long story. So I grew up in Adelaide, South Australia, so not too far away from where you are. I had to leave Adelaide because it's famous for three things. It's famous for lots of churches. It's also famous for big great white sharks. So you can't really go swimming there, and it's famous for serial killers. This is true. And so I left Adelaide, and I went to Sydney, and I spent over a decade working with some of the world's largest media companies. So I started working for News International under Rupert Murdoch, and then I worked for a really big digital media business called Getty Images, based out of New York. And that was my first introduction into the world of private equity investment, so acquisitions and scale up. And then I spent the next 10 years getting involved in lots of acquisitions. I've done 117 acquisitions in total. And as you said, 24 exits. And these days I buy, scale and sell businesses myself. So I buy them as low a value as I can get. I build value in them, and then I sell them and make money from that. And then I teach people how to do that as well. So that's kind of the area. So I'm always into what I call leveraging wealth creation through acquisitions.
Awesome. So when you say you've done 117 acquisitions, do you mean that you own these businesses, or do you mean that you help your clients to acquire?
No, I worked for a decade with some of the world's largest private equity firms. So for those who don't know what that is, so private equity, effectively, it's where you have a firm that's raised money from usually high net worth individuals, sometimes other sort of institutional funds. And they go out and they buy businesses, and then they bolt other businesses onto the businesses they acquire. And they create these kind of groups. It's called a roll-up strategy. And then they sell those groups up to bigger private equity firms, or sometimes to bigger corporates. The last big exit I did, and this will shape what you asked, Alaric, is 14 businesses built together, so acquired and put together. And we sold that group to Blackstone Private Equity for $2.3 billion, which was a 14 times multiple on the profit. But that was 14, just to be clear, 14 separate businesses all brought together, and then you increase the value by that structure and that strategy.
Got it. So basically, I like basically doing roll-ups. So what multiple was that again? 14 times multiple. Okay.
Yeah, we're about $180,000 net profit, I think. It was something like that anyway, but yeah, 14 times that.
And no, you sold it for 2.3 million or billion?
Billion.
Okay. Wow. Amazing.
Yeah, so I've been involved. So the 117 acquisitions, some of those are ones I've done personally, so businesses that I own outright now. Some of those are through private equity, and some of those are when I was working for Getty Images. We did a lot of acquisitions when I worked for Getty, and that was one of the success stories of the growth of that company.
Awesome. So tell me more about the multiples that you buy businesses at, and what are the price to earning multiples that you sell businesses at.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll talk about what I do personally now, because this is probably the more interesting thing. So I buy good, established, profitable businesses from people who are retiring or retirement age. And I pay at the moment anywhere between 2 to 4 times profit. And these are small businesses in comparison to what I said before. So they're usually doing less than $10 million in revenue. But I'm doing what is called a leverage buyout. And I'm sure we talked about that beforehand. So I am leveraging the assets in those businesses. So I'm not putting all my own cash in to buy them up front. But because I'm buying them between 2 to 4 times the net profit or the EBITDA multiple, what I'm doing is buying within certain industries. So vertically or horizontally within certain industries, I can say which ones I'm looking at right now, with the intent of what we call multiple arbitrage. So I'm going to add the multiples together. And the way private equity works, the more profit you have, the bigger the entity, the bigger the group, the higher the multiple. So I'm looking to exit at a minimum 6 times profit, usually up towards 8 to 10 times for these smaller businesses. So I'm buying at 2 to 4, selling at 6 to 8 to 10.
And you grow the profit as well.
Yeah. So the businesses I'm buying, this is the other thing, I'm buying them off people who don't really understand progressive marketing, or that, you know, some of the businesses I've invested in haven't even had good websites or any website. Like they literally are making good money because they've been in their local area for 30 years. They've got a good clientele, established client base. The way they market is they might go around and put flyers in people's letterboxes. So, you know, someone like you and I could go into a business like that and introduce sales funnels, you know, Facebook ads, you know, all those sort of things that are quite commonplace. But a lot of the businesses that I buy, they've never even heard of these things, let alone applied them.
Okay. So, after you buy the business, how do you operate the business? Do you hire a CEO to run the business, or what do you normally do?
So when I'm looking, when I've got a whole structure, I'm very process driven. So I have a very, very precise structure of sourcing, qualifying, financing, everything. And when I'm sourcing and qualifying a deal, one of the things I'm always looking for is a natural number two, like a general manager or an ops manager in the business that is not necessarily strategically strong, because I'm going to be there strategically. I'm the owner investor, but I want a really good operational person in the business. So it doesn't mean that if I find a great business, a profitable business that hasn't got that in place, that I won't buy it, but then I have to find someone, and it's more risky. But I'm always looking for that person. They don't have to be, you know, a superstar, but they have to know how to run a machine with absolute precision.
Got it. So right now, when you acquire businesses, how many businesses do you currently own? And do you normally acquire them through a special purpose vehicle, or do you, yeah?
Yes, I do. Yeah, so exactly that. So I have 7 companies that I own outright now. We've got another 3 that will close in the next, hopefully 3 months. So they're in process. We always have a pipeline of around about 20 that we're looking at any one time, with the intent to only close 1 to 2. We do walk away a lot from deals if they don't fit our very clear criteria. And that's something that I advise people to do. I buy them through an SPV, so a special purpose vehicle. And then I have partners who are involved in that acquisition. So it's not just me outright. I have a deal team, as it's called. And sometimes that deal team has investors who are just putting cash into the deals. And we effectively split the equity into our family offices. So we all have family office setups and structures for tax, but we do the acquisition through an SPV.
Got it. And what does your team consist of? Like lawyers, accountants, or?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So the way I do it, and I've sort of scaled this out now, is the most important roles that you need to have. You need a really good accountant, CPA, and you need a really good lawyer. They're going to be the ones that are crucial for the main component of due diligence, and making sure that you're not overpaying and making sure there's no skeletons in the closet of some of these businesses. Remember, these are old businesses that I'm buying, established businesses, but they don't always have great financial records. They don't always have audited accounts, for example, right? We're not talking about corporate acquisitions here. We're talking about car washes in Texas or security firms in, California, right? That sort of thing. So good lawyer, good accountants. I often have someone who is, if it's an industry that I'm not as strong in, I'll bring in someone who understands the industry, understands the market, and I'll give them a piece of equity to be part of the deal team. And then I have investors who want to invest in the businesses that I can find. They're prepared to put cash in, but they don't want to have any operational control. They just simply want to do that. And the way I work with them is quite interesting. So if they're going to put, let's say, 20% of the deal price in, I often give them double that back in equity, which sounds a bit odd, but the value of cash to get a deal over the line is more important in many cases, but I'm still retaining 60% of the deal.
Got it. And so when it comes to accountants and lawyers, how's your fee structure like? Do you normally do it based on a success fee, or you pay them up front, and how does it normally?
Yeah, by the way, I just want to say these are great questions, by the way, Alaric. You are much more understanding of this world than a lot of people. Yeah, so I always advise when you're starting out to do contingent-based pricing. And quite often you've got to be prepared to pay. You might be paying twice what you normally would for that, but the risk is then, mitigated. And the other thing you've got to realize is that the fees, all of the fees, are paid for from the business you acquire. So they're not your personal fees. Now, what I've got in my personal structure now is I've got some very trusted, I've got a trusted CPA and a very trusted lawyer in my team. And so I give them a percentage of equity in the deals. So they do effectively work pro bono to get the deal done, but they're going to get paid through the equity at the end. But you won't have that if you're doing this for the first time. You have to build that over time.
So, like, how do you get them to agree to do it based on a success fee?
Well,
assuming if let's say you didn't have the relationship beforehand, how should a newbie go about doing it? Yeah.
Well, there are plenty. It's a very common way of doing it. So if you look out there, I mean, I do a lot of stuff, I said, in North America, the UK. I haven't done as much in Southeast Asia, but you'll find people out there that operate on this basis. You know, that's how the firms work. So you really just have to look out there and start to Google that in your geographic area. But I often find, you know, you probably want to get some recommendations as well, personal recommendations of people who aren't sharks in this space, because it's an important decision. But it's not like uncommon. I also pay, you know, if I've got a very specific business I'm looking at where it's hard to find the right person, the right legal expertise, I will often pay a certain retainer up front and then have a hybrid model where I'll pay the rest on success. And that's the other way that people can look at it.
So how do you normally find your deals?
Yeah, so the best place to find deals, interestingly, is through what we call intermediaries. And I'll explain how this works, but it's again, it's accountants, it's lawyers, and it's wealth advisors, it's wealth managers, right? So, you know, our good friend JT Fox is a wealth advisor, so he gets deals all the time. Now, let me explain this. If you're, let's assume you're 65, 70 years of age. You've had a business for 30 years. It's really profitable. It's great. You've got no succession plan. So you've had children, but they've decided to go off and, you know, become YouTube stars or whatever. and you're there thinking, what the hell am I going to do? Now, the first person that you normally talk to about an exit is your accountant, your lawyer, or your wealth advisor. Quite often, you won't even tell your family or your wife or whatever. So what I say to people is build a good network with those three entities first. Then don't be afraid of brokers. So brokers, if you can form a good relationship with a business broker, that still can be very valuable, but you've also got a bit of a watch out, but they are the people who are tasked to sell a business for a business owner. And then the third way is really relatively old school, but it's just direct prospecting, getting out there. So I use LinkedIn quite a lot. I have a team of people who are doing research for me around types of businesses. And then we send out emails or actually even handwritten letters. Sometimes we do that. We haven't done that as much for a while, but we position ourselves as an investor. We sow the seed of what, you know, we do, how we do it. We don't go into the leverage buyout at this point. At this point, it's just really about getting that first initial search and sourcing done.
So when you find businesses on LinkedIn, right, did they have the intention before that to sell, or do you sell them this concept of selling their business, or all the while they already had this idea to sell the business?
It's a mixture of both. It's a mixture of both. So if I'll talk about the UK and then I'll talk about the US for a sec. So in the UK, you've got Companies House, which lists all the directors of a company, and also lists their home address, or certainly the address where you can contact them by, it can sometimes be their accountant's address, but it's an address, a physical address. And you have the age, the date of birth. So what we do is if we choose a sector, so we're looking at the moment at commercial cleaning businesses for lots of different reasons, but we're looking at that as a sector. We'll have a look at all of the businesses that are out there, and then we'll go to Companies House and we'll look at the kind of age profile of the directors. And then we'll also look at if there's any issues with the business, because you can get access to kind of some of the financial statements. So we'll do all that research first. When we get to a list, might be 20, 30, 40 prospects, we'll then contact them via LinkedIn or via a letter. And that letter will say, hey, listen, are you interested in selling your business? Obviously more detailed than that. But quite often what we're trying to do is get someone who may be thinking they want to sell their business in the next 2 or 3 years, but they haven't gone ahead with anything yet. And we want to get them before they go to a broker, ideally. Okay. The other way, and I'll give this to any of your US listeners, there's a fantastic website in the US called BizBuySell, bizbuysell.com. And it's literally like a shopping list of businesses for sale. There's 10,000 people retiring per day in North America, and that's increasing at the moment. And you've got like 1 in 12 of those businesses will actually sell. So you've got a whole heap. The thing about BizBuySell, Alaric, which is great, is you can search that website and you can search for what we call seller financing, businesses that are going to be paid for over time from the profits of the business, deferred payments. And they actually list the businesses that are prepared to negotiate on that level. So that's huge. You can buy the business from the profits, you know, over time, which is just like, when I say that to people, a lot of people think that's crazy. It's mad, but but it happens.
Yeah. And so when you invest in deals, do you normally put your own money in, or do you normally do deals that have no money down, or what kind of deals?
I do a mixture. One thing I'm really transparent about is that there's a lot of people out there that say you can buy a business for no money down.
Yeah.
That's absolute not true, right? Let me be clear. It can happen. It can happen, right? And I've been involved in deals like that, but they are the exception. So I'm always out there saying you can buy a business using other people's money, what I teach around leverage buyouts, but you do have to think of a little bit of cash you've got to put in. So this is what my 3 deals normally look like. Sometimes I'll get a deal where I can leverage the whole thing, literally leverage absolutely every part of it. And so by that, I mean, it's got high assets. It's got lots of things like receivables. The seller is extremely motivated to sell. So I can get over 50% deferred payments, sometimes up to 70%, is the best I've ever achieved. And everything is leveraged. In that deal, I'm not putting any of my own cash in. Well, actually, sometimes I put some of my own cash in, but I take it out at closing straight away. So technically it's a neutral deal. So that's one type of deal. Second type of deal is I leverage as much as I possibly can through the assets, but there's a small amount that is required that I have to put in. Sometimes that can be 25, up to $50,000. I never put a heap of my own money in. I always put in a bit, right?
Okay.
And then I've got some fees on top of that sometimes. But again, I take that out of the business once I've acquired it. The third way I do it with the businesses that are a little bit higher up the chain, normally where they're between 5 to 10 million in revenues. So they're making sort of at an absolute minimum, usually high 6 figures into the millions of net profit. I have investors who come in with me. And that's where I structure it, where I'll go find the deal, I'll source the deal, I'll negotiate it, I'll do everything around it, I'll get everything financed and leveraged, and there's a remaining closing payment that I'll need to bring in from an investor. I call that a pre-pack because I pre-package the deal. I don't raise it like a private equity fund. I actually go out to individual people that I know who are looking for these deals, and I present them the whole deal on a plate, and then I take their money into the deal.
Got it.
And that's how I do it.
So in terms of the funds that you raise, right? So do you currently have like a venture capital fund or like a private equity fund, or you only look for the investors when you find the deal, then only you look for the investors, or do you
It's the latter. It's the latter. And it's a great question because a lot of people ask me, why don't I have a fund? And the reason I've never done that is because I spent 10 years working for the funds. And the one thing I learned from being in private equity is that when you are managing someone else's money in that way, it's like having a job. And the thing about entrepreneurship is, like, one of the highest values of entrepreneurship is freedom. So what I prefer to do, it takes a little bit longer, but I've got a good network. I prefer to take each deal out to a very select number of investors, private investors that I think will like the deal.
Got it.
Different way of doing it, maybe a little bit slower, but it means that I have freedom around how I can operate, which is more important to me.
Got it. So when you buy a business, do you normally buy 100% of the business, or you normally buy like maybe a percentage of it?
A bit of both. So I've got investments in multiple businesses. So I own 7, but I've got another 10 on top of that. So 17 in total, which I have small investments, everything down to 5%. I don't, I get asked to advise on acquisitions and exits all the time. And quite often I have a fee structure where I get paid to advise, like a retained fee, but I also get a percentage of equity for what I'm doing. So if I go and buy a business myself, I'm looking to buy the majority. Particularly if I'm doing all the work in the structuring and finding the deals. But I do give equity away, as I said, within the deal team. And sometimes there's a couple of other things that's worth mentioning. If there is a really good number 2 in the business that I want to incentivize, so the general manager we spoke about before, I want them to have an ownership mindset. So quite often I'll give them something like 10% of the equity of the business, the future facing equity. And I'll even give them the potential to go up to 30% on certain businesses. So it sounds like, well, why would you give 30%? Well, I don't want to ever have to run the business, right? I want someone to feel like they own it. And the other thing, and I haven't done as much of this, but I've had the conversations around it, is sometimes when I'm building rapport with the seller, they don't want to own the business anymore, but they like the strategy of what we're going to do with the business. And so sometimes they say, oh, listen, I'll sell you 80% of the business. I want to keep 20% in. And I'm a little bit, I don't like doing that because having them around is sometimes tricky, but I'm also, if I entertain that, it's because I think, you know what, they're not going to be a problem. They're going to sort of step away, but at the same time, it means that I can get the business on the most favorable terms.
Got it. So and so what are your plans for the future? Like, have you ever thought of like taking a company IPO before or anything?
Yeah, I get involved in that so the way I work currently is I have my own investments and I also have a consultancy firm and I do advisory. I'm advising two companies at the moment that will probably have a pathway to IPO. In fact, one of them's a clean tech business based out of Arizona, and I've got another business in London, which is in fintech. So I've never taken a business to an IPO. So my whole niche, if you like, is private equity. So moving up and down the levels of private equity from mid-market to the big players. But my end game is effectively building out an empire of investments. So as I said, I've got 7 to 17, depending on how you look at the structures. I want to have a portfolio of 30, 40, 50 businesses. And I want to then have a management structure underneath that. We're on the pathway to having an enterprise value of over 100 million within the next 3 years currently. And I want to get that to over $1 billion within the next 5. So to do that, I need to basically do a lot of roll-ups. I need to do a lot of structuring, and I need to turn everything into a machine. But the ultimate vision for me is to be able to create a huge empire structure from the stuff that we've been speaking about today.
Got it. And so which sector do you choose to, target?
What's that? Sorry, what's the?
Which sector do you choose to target? Is it the
Oh
health
God,
sector?
yeah. And then, well, you know what's funny, right? I've had a career. So because I did corporate for a while and then I've moved into private equity, I've worked across most sectors, right? So my strongest sectors are media, education, professional services. So they're where I've actually been the CEO of companies in those spaces. But I've made acquisitions in, as I said, in cleaning, in security, general. Actually, we've got a couple of tech businesses at the moment. I don't tend to invest as much in technology-driven businesses because the multiples are higher. It doesn't work for what I'm doing. But at the moment, I'm looking for also businesses that have got the potential to get government contracts in the US because there's a lot of money that's going to go back into relief funds post-COVID. So I'm not as precise on it has to be in this sector. For me, it's about, is the business fit the criteria that I'm talking about?
Got it. So you base it based on so what do you base it on? If it's not based on the sector, how do you make your decisions based on?
Okay. So it's based on essentially 4 to 5 things. Okay. So first and foremost has the business got a distressed seller? All right. How distressed is that seller? So, and, even as far as, are they sick? Do they only have a limited amount of time left, or has their partner died? What's the motivation for them to leave? Right? Because I've worked across so many different businesses, Alaric. I'm pretty confident I can scale up any business, any sector. And I know how to bring people in to be able to help if I've got gaps in any market knowledge. So first and foremost, is there that motivated distressed seller? Second, and partly aligned to this, is the business really profitable, but hasn't got the fundamentals in place that really make that clear as to why, right? So it's making a hell of a lot of money. You've got really high cash flow, but when you look at it, it looks very archaic.
And
I look, because I know straight away that I can automate or I can bring in progressive marketing and I can scale that thing. So look for that. Third is there someone in the business or a team in the business that can run the business when I'm not around? Okay, really, really important. Fourth area is what's the exit here? So that's where I start to look at, where are mid-market private equity buying? What are the sectors that they want to invest in? How's that looking into the future? Okay. And then I look for that. And then the last criteria is, are there lots of options for multiple acquisitions within, if this is my first company, let's say it's my portfolio company, I now want to do a buy and build. Do I have options to buy competitors, buy suppliers, buy outside of the local geography so that I can create the group that's going to allow the exit at some time in the future, normally in a 3 to 5 year horizon?
Got it. Wow.
So that's all I look for. They are the main criteria.
That's amazing. And so just like you mentioned about the business being able to run without you around. So why would a CEO, so you'll probably hire a CEO to go and run the business, right? So why would a CEO choose to work instead of setting up his own business if he knows how to run the business?
Well, this is an interesting thing because I talk about the concept of what I call acquisition entrepreneurship, right? So most people think that if you want to be an entrepreneur, right, you have to start a business, right? That's what I did. I've started businesses. I wasn't very good at starting businesses, Alaric. I didn't have the patience for it, right? but the thing about it is, like, you can become an entrepreneur by buying a business, right? And you don't have to build all the fundamentals, right? So I'm not saying that every entrepreneur is going to be right for both of those scenarios, but they are both valid pathways. And this is the thing, right? If you look at the Forbes list or the UPS list of billionaires in the world, there's around, I think it's about 2,300. There are more billionaires in the world that have come from private equity, the stuff that I'm talking about, than tech businesses. Right? So if you have the ambition to be seriously wealthy, right, you've got more chance of doing it through acquisition entrepreneurship than you have from startup. So that's why.
Okay. No, but why would a CEO who can run the business for you, why would he work for you when he could run his own business, or he could acquire a business and run his own business?
Yeah, I think, I remember I was the CEO in private equity, and now I'm doing what private equity does. So there's a point in your life where, you know, you may not do that forever, but let's say, for example, I found a really good business. Let's say you and I met, right? And I found a business that was doing 10 million revenue and around, let's say, 2.5 million profit. And I go to you, Alaric, okay, so here's the situation. I'm going to bring you in and we're going to pay you a couple $100,000 a year to be the CEO. And I'm going to give you 10% equity. Okay. But your equity could be 30% in the next 3 years. And the intention is to take that business from currently 10 million revenue to 30 million revenue within 3 years. Okay. And then we're going to sell it for probably a 10x, about 70 million, and you're going to walk away with 25 to 30 million. Is that exciting to you? Now you might say, I'm not interested, but most people, someone who's young, who kind of has a lot of fire in their belly, who wants to kind of go and make some money quickly, that's a pretty compelling offer.
So like the leverage that you have over that CEO is more of like the fact that, number one, he doesn't have the funds to go and acquire the business. Number two, he probably doesn't have the opportunity to buy that deal. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and also I'm buying businesses. The thing to get across is I'm buying small businesses here. So anything under 10 million is not a big business. When we say CEO, it's probably a little bit more of a grandiose term. They might be called CEO, but they're kind of like sort of MD, general manager type of thing. So I'm not bringing in, you know, the person who's going to go and run Amazon next.
Yeah, of course.
I'm bringing in someone who is very, very good at leading people. The best way to think of it is, if you think about sort of a military analogy, right? I might be the lieutenant or the captain, right? I'm not going to go down on the platoon, you know, stage and go and manage all the troops. But I want a really good drill sergeant who's down there managing that platoon, a really good leader, someone who makes sure that the business runs or the people run to a level of precision. When I say a CEO or an MD, I want someone like that.
Got it.
That's what I want. And so they're not going to be the most strategically strong, but they're going to be operationally brilliant. Got
it. So like for me, I run a coaching business, right? And what I'm good at is scaling coaching businesses, because I've got about 1,400 clients on my own. And so if you were in my shoes, what would your play be? Would you go and acquire more coaching businesses, or will you grow coaching businesses, or will you acquire like percentages?
What's your model, Alaric? So when you say 1,400, I take it you're using group coaching and you're using online as well. You're not doing traditional.
Correct. So I'm doing group coaching. They get an online course. So each one pays about $500 to about $5,000.
Perfect. I've got the same model. So when I teach acquisition entrepreneurship, I have online program, group coaching, and it's extremely scalable. It's incredibly scalable. So there's a couple of things you can do with that. You can obviously go and buy traditional IP. So a lot of it in coaching businesses is about owning your methodology, right? So having something that you can then package up in different ways. So online courses, group coaching, whatever else. So you've got that. So I've got that. You've got that. You can go and buy IP and methodology from let's call it very old, archaic coaching or consultancy businesses. And then you can pivot those businesses into something more progressive. So the hybrid evergreen model that you're describing, right? So you could definitely do that, right? But I think one of the things about what I do is I use my coaching consultancy business to provide cash flow to go and buy assets. So if I was you, I would, you know, maybe scale up your business a bit, but take the money that you're making and then go and buy other businesses outside of the sector, maybe just interesting, profitable businesses, and then you'll create wealth from that.
Okay, but I would say that a coaching business, okay, you see, because a coaching business doesn't really have much assets, like it's intellectual property and everything. And I wouldn't see a point in buying the intellectual property of another consultancy? Because a lot of those information is like, I could literally read maybe 5 books about that topic and combine that in and package that into an
It
information.
depends what you're buying. Do you know Brendan Burchard?
Yeah.
Do you know he doesn't own his business?
Okay.
He's owned by another company called growth.com.
Okay.
Well, partly owned. And the point is that growth.com is a private equity firm that buys up coaching consultancy IP. Because they're buying the brand and they're buying the methodology. So you're right, but if someone's already got a certain amount of establishment, there is value. If I was you, I would, grow doing what you're doing. You're going to scale it anyway, right? You know how to do that. I would just take the money you're making from that, the high cash flow, and I'd buy assets. Like it's like some people choose to buy real estate. I just choose to buy businesses.
Correct. That's what I want to do. Like I want to acquire more businesses, but I'm just thinking like, because I'm good at scaling like information businesses, right? But the thing about information businesses are that most of them don't have much assets. So I'm not sure like what should my play be in this.
You're 100% right that it's hard to do leverage buyouts when there aren't a huge amount of assets. You're often looking for more distressed businesses. So one of my mentors here in the UK, he bought a education and training business, very, let's call it analog, face-to-face training. He's got a very strong personal brand in the UK. He repositioned that business. It had lots of customers. It had like a massive list, like 40,000 on its client list.
Got it.
And he just changed he bought it for hardly anything. He changed the products. He changed the marketing, but he used the lists to then sell different products and services to. And that business is now doing 18 million turnover a year.
Yeah. So I agree if it's buying the customer database. Can I guess who your mentor is?
Who's that?
Jonathan J.
No, different person. No, a guy called Rob Moore.
Rob Moore. Yeah, I just interviewed Rob Moore as well.
Yeah, so no, Rob Moore. So Rob Moore and the person who got me into podcasting with my podcast, Scale Up Your Business, was Rob Moore. But no, I know Jonathan J. Jonathan's, I work mainly across North America more so. He does a lot more stuff in the UK, but no, I've never worked with him personally. Yeah,
Rob Moore helped Jonathan J to market teaching people how to buy and sell businesses. So I thought it was Jonathan J when you talk about education business. But I interviewed Rob Moore, so I kind of know that he also does buying and selling businesses as well as
he's diversified. His background is real estate, but he does a lot of other things. But what we're talking about here, though, is, I mean, we do very similar things. It's just, my niche is very much about that acquisition entrepreneurship. But for me, the ecosystem works because I'm not only teaching people how to do it, I'm actually getting them to go out and find deals. I offer partnership with those people. So if they've gone through anything I teach, they can come back and partner with me. I normally do a 50-50 on the deals they bring to me. And then it means that I actually have deal flow coming towards me. So you know how you asked the question, how do I find deals? Well, people bring them to me. So that helps my whole ecosystem. So everything is an ecosystem, but still focused on the area that I have expertise in.
Got it. So, okay, when you raise funds from investors and you give them equity and all that, do you pay dividends to them?
Yes. Yeah. So we share, we agree. There's 3 ways of looking at it. So we look at anyone who's going to be operational in the business. So if someone is like the MD, let's say you're a shareholder and you're also an employee, well, then you'll be paid a salary from the operating cost of the business. Then we agree a certain amount of working capital and or investment into the business. Remember, we're trying to invest to scale up. And then whatever is left, we then split as dividends based on the percentage of equity. Quite often it's quarterly payments, but sometimes it's annual. We might not take anything out for until the end of the year.
Got it. So what are some tips that you want to give to people who are just starting out who want to get into this space?
Yeah. So, I mean, as I said, I'm really transparent around it's simple to learn the theory to it, right? And everything that I teach around the process is super, super straightforward. However, a lot of it comes down to mindset. A lot of it comes down to your ability to build rapport and the self-belief that you have to be successful, right? Like anything in business, but I'm very clear about that. You've got to go into this with the mindset of being a deal maker. Right, you are here to do, to make deals. Right, there's a certain persona around that. So my tips to people is go and get educated. Right, not necessarily with me, but go and learn. If you're interested in this stuff, go and learn about it because there's quite a lot of good stuff out there. Even in Harvard Business Review and stuff, and you can see in Forbes and Fortune, there's so many articles now about why this is the best time in history to go and buy a small business. So that's the first thing. Definitely go and get a mentor or something like that. And I often advise, you know, do it with someone else. If you've got someone else who could partner with you, I've got a partner that does all my deals with me, work with him for over 8 years. It makes the whole experience more enjoyable. And then just go out there and start having a look around, right? And start, you know, making some offers and things like that once you've learned the process. And you'd be surprised. One of the people who came through my program, and this is the exception, right? But he finished the program, and literally he found his first deal within 5 days, and he had the business completed within 5 weeks, and he's still the owner of that business today. And he didn't do anything crazily different. So like he just listened and applied. But you can buy a business within 3 months on average if you take heed on what I'm saying.
Got it. So when you're talking about mentorship, so like did Rob more like personally mentor you to grow to find businesses, or?
No, podcasting. So I've got 2 mentors and I've got a coach right now. I'm a big believer in personal development.
Okay.
I choose mentors based on they have to have done it before, right? Coach is a little bit different. My coaching is more around personal development. I'm a big fan of people like Dr. John DeMartini and those sort of things.
Got it.
But Rob mentored me on podcasting. And so my podcast launched and did very, very well, basically because he showed me the ropes. And a lot of my stuff on buying businesses, I've got a very strong, what I call old school private equity network. So a lot of the teaching around acquisitions, scale up, selling, all that sort of stuff has come from, you know, 10 to 15 years in private equity. So I was mentored for years on the job. So these days, that's where I'm effectively just teaching people what I learned from that time in private equity.
Got it. And when you talk about partnership, right? When you split equity, do you do like a fixed model, or do you do a dynamic model, like a slicing pie model? I'm not sure if you've heard of like slicing pie from Mike Moyer. Have you heard about
I think
that
I understand what you're saying, but it might be termed differently in terms of when you allocate equity, or are you talking about?
Yeah. So okay, maybe just to make sure we're on the same page. So like in the slicing pie model, he mentions that equity should be split in a dynamic way, which means maybe at the start, if you contributed more, you should own more equity. But towards the end of the business, like towards maybe 3 months down the road, or 6 months down the road, or 3 years down the road, if you contribute less, then you should own less equity. So like the split always changes. It's not like a fixed 50-50 or fixed.
That's a common way of doing things in startups. You know, when there isn't really much value, right? And it's about, you know, if someone goes and brings in all of the revenue, for example, should they get a higher allocation of equity? In the businesses that I'm talking about, they're usually quite established, right? So, you know, they're making hundreds of thousands, if not millions already. I find that it's a difficult conversation in the acquisition entrepreneurship to have that slicing the pie or the sliding scale piece. You're better off saying, okay, are you a shareholder or are you operational? If you're operational, that's different. You're going to get paid twice then. You're going to get a salary plus your equity position, or even a salary and bonus and equity sometimes, depending on the business. But I tend to keep it fixed. The only thing that changes the equity provision in my mind is the amount of cash that is put into the deal, either at the beginning to get it done, or if the cash injection is needed into the business through the growth. But quite often, these are already cash generative, so you don't have to go and put more money in because you're making enough cash flow from the scale up.
And what about your partnership? Got it. And what about your partnership? Like, because there'll be sometimes that, like, do you ever feel that it's unbalanced? Like, for example, if sometimes you feel, oh, I'm doing all the work, or oh, he's doing all the work, you know, and because it does happen in every partnership, right? So how do you deal with that? Yeah.
The way that I've always got around that is I always agree. The principle is always 50-50 in my book.
Okay.
Right now, I work with people that I know, like, and trust. So my business partner and I have been together so long that we're very comfortable that on one deal I might do more work, he might do less, but it's going to even out in the end. The reason I have that mindset is because I'm doing multiple deals. I'm not going to ever have to worry about money, right? For me, it's not about like the game of who's got more zeros in their bank account. So I'd prefer to like give a little bit of equity up to keep the relationship strong. Like, you know, you're doing more work, I'm doing less. I prefer the relationship to be strong instead of us quibbling about who should get the extra 5%. Correct. Because you're going to make as much money anyway, depending on how we join up. There's more value in us joining up and driving together than there is us quibbling around that. So,
but let's say, I'm just thinking out loud, right? So let's say something happens to one of the partners. Let's say maybe they go to a hospital and they can't contribute to the partnership anymore. Then what will you do?
So that's happened to me. That's happened to me. So we will often, and this is the other thing. See, my sort of things around family and relationships and friendships are really important. So we've had someone who had a minority stake in a business that we acquired, and they got sick. Didn't pass away, but had to leave the business. And we did a valuation on the business at that point in time, and then we paid out him and his family based on that valuation.
Got it. Okay, that's the fair thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's maybe not traditional. There are different ways of like doing sort of, you know, tagging rights and all this sort of stuff. But we tend to think that like we want to be as fair as possible on anything that happens. And that just means you have longer term relationships, and that ultimately leads to I think more sustainable success.
Got it. And okay, so let's talk about the size of the deals. Like for example, you're talking about like 5 million to 10 million and everything. Do you feel that a newbie should do such large deals as well?
No.
Like such large deals because it's relative, or what do you think?
No. Well, okay. There's two ways of looking at this, and as again, I was just going to say again, your questions are superb, Alaric.
Thank you.
So it can take as long to do a big deal time-wise and complexity-wise as it can some of the smaller deals. And the reason for that is the smaller deals don't usually have enough information. So you're kind of trying to find the information to make sure everything works. The bigger deals have just got more complexity, you know, more employee contracts, more sites, more supplier things to look at, more legal parameters. But there's more risk and there's more external investment, usually, not always, that has to go in the bigger deals versus a small one. So what I often say is, if this is your first deal, you might be employed right now, you might be working for someone and you want to do this on the side, which is absolutely possible, by the way. Go and look for a deal that's definitely under $1 million, right, in terms of the valuation. So remember I said beforehand, between 2 to 4 times profit. Let's average that out at 3 times. So you're looking at a business that's probably doing no more than about $300,000 to $350,000 in annualized net profit. Okay. Now that's a nice number, because usually you can leverage. There's you know, it's a big enough business that you can do something with. It's a sizable amount of money that could replace your income or even you know, add to it. If you start to go too low, let's say you go below 200,000 net profit, or let's say below 150, the watch out there is that you might be buying someone's job. So they're not going to have enough resources in the business to have a management team, a general manager to run it. So it doesn't mean don't look at those businesses, but be aware that you might want to go in there and run the business. Therefore, you're the owner operator, then that's absolutely fine. But if you want to be the owner investor like me, you don't want to be buying a job. Okay. Yeah. So that's the way to look at it. So I say, look up to about $1 million max if you want to be the owner investor. If you want to buy the business, you can go down to 500,000 in terms of the valuation. And even if you're really starting out, you haven't got a lot of money, you want to just put like, say, 20 grand of your own cash in, have a look at that 500 to 600K threshold in terms of the valuation, because you can get some good deals done around that level.
So when you first started out, did you ever imagine that you'll be doing this, like, let's say 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 15 years ago?
Definitely not 15 years ago, because I was a corporate guy. I was I got quite high up in these media companies. So I was on the board before I was 30 years of age, and I was a CEO of some divisions, if you like, or group MD of some divisions before I was 35. But when I got into private equity and started to get involved in that world, which kind of happened randomly, I didn't try to do it; it just kind of happened through introductions and network. I got opened up to a whole different level of how wealth was created. I had no idea. I was making good sort of, 6 figures plus bonuses and all this sort of stuff, like decent money. And then I saw people taking home checks of 7 figures just within the space of a few months. Right. I'm like, wow. But I also saw a lot of people get screwed over as well. So I was very attuned to how you make money in that. So if you go back to maybe 3 or 4 years from where we are today, that's when I left private equity and started to do what we've been discussing on this podcast. I didn't maybe see myself doing that. I kind of thought I'd stay in private equity for ages, but I thought, you know what, I'm gonna get out there and do this on my own terms. So what I do now, I kind of created from the experiences of what I went through, but what I do now provides a lot more freedom, a lot more choice, and to be honest with you, it's more lucrative because I can pull the levers in a way that I couldn't in the world of private equity.
Can you share more about like your first deal?
Oh God, yeah. So the first deal that I did by myself, I found in my local cafe. This is a funny one because I often say that you'll find your first deal on your phone. Like there'll be someone on your phone right now who knows someone who's selling a business, right? I guarantee it. So my local cafe, I told the owner of the cafe, Brad, that I was looking to buy a business. He obviously, you know, hairdressers, cafe owners, they all bartenders, they talk to people, right? That's the job. And he spoke to another person, and that person wanted to sell their business, again, retirement age. It had been the wife's business, and she'd been running it for a number of years. You know, it was her baby, and they wanted to get out. Now, the interesting thing about the deal is they had around £700,000 of cash in the business that they wanted to take out tax efficiently. And they then needed to sell it because if they took it out just normally, like just, you know, remove the cash, they would have had to pay a lot more in the tax percentage. So we structured the deal. That was a seller finance deal, 100% seller finance deal, because I could provide a mechanism for them to take the tax out efficiently over time. That deal was also a sliding equity deal on the basis that as they took cash out, I then had more equity in the business. So I didn't own the business outright from the beginning, which I didn't like, but you know, it was fine. It just meant that they had a bit of control in the beginning, but we had everything done over the course of around about 10 months. So there we are. So yeah, so still got that business, does well, doesn't make a lot of money. It was tiny, but it just runs by itself. And they also had another person who had been sort of underneath the lady who owned it for a number of times. She was a really good salesperson, and she now is the general manager.
So like when you say the mechanism to kind of like pay lesser taxes, I wanted to say evade, but good thing I watched my mouth. Anyway, so
yes.
Roughly how do you do it?
Oh God, this is for them. This wasn't for me, right? So this wasn't. There are so many different ways of thinking about that. You know, have offshore bank accounts and things. But no, in the UK, there's a thing called entrepreneurs relief. And effectively, it's changed now. It used to be much more attractive, but used to be able to take a certain amount. If you sold a business, you had a £10 million limit of where you would only pay 10% tax on your capital gains. I think it's now 20%. It's gone up. But in that situation, because I was buying the business and they were then exiting via a capital event, it meant it could unlock that level of tax percentage. Whereas if they were taking the money out as income or something else, it would have been another 10 percentage points higher. So if you think about that, that's hundreds of thousands of pounds difference. Yeah. Which meant that I could leverage that also on the price. I paid 2.5 times, 2.6, I think it was, net profit for that business.
2.6 times of the net profit. So, okay, wait. So I don't quite understand. So that means you paid for the business, so that goes to them, correct? And then you own the cash.
Oh. Yeah. So you buy a business on what's called a cash-free, debt-free basis. Okay. So they can take the cash out of the business. Right. But if there's any debt in the business or anything like that, any liabilities, the cash has to pay for that first.
Got it.
Okay. But because of the way we bought it, I effectively paid for the business over time, over that sort of 10-month period. So I agreed a certain amount of money for, let's say 10%. And then over time I bought 100%. But what happened is we managed to be able to take the cash out as what we call a closing payment over time. So effectively, as I bought more shares, right, it meant that the business could then take the cash out as a closing payment, and then they could get the tax thresholds. So it's quite a technical way of doing it, but we had two accountants working out the numbers. But this is the good thing about your question is that in the beginning of this conversation, we started talking about, you know, it's quite simple and all that. It is, but you've got to have really good people around you. Like I'm not an accountant, right? In my private equity days, I was an operating guy, right? Not the financial guy. So you've got to have good people who can look at all the different ways that you can structure the deals, because how you structure the deals is a big part of how you create short and long-term value.
And so you didn't have to come up with that yourself. Your accountant came up with that for you.
Well, their accountant did, because the thing about this deal is had they not had they just hadn't taken the cash out of the business. It was sitting in the business, right? Because they were thinking about closing the business down to take the cash out efficiently. That was another option for them because they didn't want to have the business anymore. So it was their accountant who said, "Oh, hold on, why don't we structure it like this?" Which was absolutely legal, but it was a little bit of a kind of different way. But for them, it worked because their home motivation was just getting that cash out within 12 months tax efficiently.
Got it.
That's why. So that's, yeah. So I suppose the story here for people is this, or the lesson is, have a great accountant, have a great lawyer, be open-minded to how the deal can get done, but have a very clear kind of what is it, like a go, no go for you. Because I've been involved in
ethically or legally. What do you mean by that?
Well, no, the go, no go, or the what I mean by that is, if something changes fundamentally as you're going through the process, and that change suddenly feels very, very uncomfortable, that's what I mean by go, no go. So go means, yeah, it still feels good, I'm going to go ahead. No go means now it's a red flag. What happens a lot here, Alaric, is people get what's called deal heat. It's the same as walking into a house that you love and going, or a car. You know, it doesn't matter if I can't afford this now, I'm buying the house, right? Or I'm buying the car. Same thing happens in businesses. Let's say you've been spending like 4 to 6 weeks with this person, you're getting to know them, you're learning about the business, all these things, right? And then something happens at the end. Like a weird shareholder comes in and says the price is now more. And you should, at that point in time, if it doesn't work for you, walk away. But you'd be surprised how many people go, I still want the business. But all of a sudden, it's the emotion coming out as opposed to the practicality.
Got it. Tell me more about, like, have you lost money in your business, or have you ever lost money doing an acquisition before? And like, what's your worst?
I've lost money in investing in startups. I lost quite a lot of money, you know, hundreds of thousands in that. So but people often come to me and ask for investment into their businesses. I don't do early stage investment for those reasons, because I have no control and there's more uncertainty. I've had one business in the last 4 years of doing this myself, 4 to 5 years now, which failed. And that was in a retail, it was a retail business. And that was, I put that down to a bit of inexperience of the sector. So it wasn't one of my core sectors. I didn't have someone around me who probably understood the sector as well as I did. And the other thing was, because it was an online business that relied a lot on, you know, Amazon, Shopify, drop shipping. The problem with something like that, and people get very excited about buying businesses that are Amazon businesses and all this. If Amazon changes the way it works, right, you know, and that's your channel, then you haven't got much to play with, right? And so this business, we bought it when the margins were very, very good. It was very focused niche. And then Amazon changed the way that it distributed some of that. Plus competition increased considerably as well. So we got the margins wrong. And the business could have run, but it was operating at like 10% net in the end. And it wasn't worth the effort.
Got it.
But I didn't put a lot of money into that. I mean, I lost a bit of money, but we're talking tens of thousands of pounds, not nothing significant.
So you've never lost like hundreds of thousands of pounds before?
I have, but just not in what I'm talking about, not in doing what I'm doing now. No.
Okay, but in like investing in startups.
Yes, I have. Oh, don't get me started. Well, I tell you where I have lost money. I've lost money in my own startups. So in the beginning, before I got into the world of corporate, I did do a couple of businesses and they didn't work very well. And back then that was experience. I was like 18 when I first started a business, and I sold my first business at 21, but it was a bit of a car crash, a disaster. I didn't lose money on that, but I didn't make much.
Got it.
And what I found is, I think back to different types of entrepreneurs, some people are really good at startup. Some are really creative. They have the passion for startup, and others are good at scale up. Right. And I think there's a different skill set and mindset in both of those dimensions. So I'm better at buying something that has foundations and scaling. That's just where I like to play.
I think the startup phase is people who are very good at experimenting, people who are very good at testing, whereas the scale up phase is people who are very good at coming up with systems and all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
that's right. Optimizing. In my mind, I'm not an engineer by thinking, but I like precision. I love focus. You know, I love things operating like a really well-oiled machine. I get frustrated when they're not. And so because that's what I love and what I value, that's when I tend to lend myself into this more acquisition entrepreneurship space.
Got it. So, you know, the 7 businesses that you own right now, right? Do you own all of them from the same SPV, or you have different SPVs?
No, same SPV. So we have a holding company effectively.
Holding company of you and your partner?
Yep, 50-50 each in that. 50. So me and my main business partner, and then we make multiple investments off the SPV.
Got it.
Now, we're looking to change that a little bit because we're doing more US investment, and we've had to get some advice of how to do that. And the other thing we haven't done is we haven't set up where that SPV should be based. At the moment, it's based in the UK, which is not necessarily the best place for it. And we're still trying to get some advice on, other areas for that, again, for tax efficiency and all those things. But the way I think of it is like, I've got a family office, which is basically my wife and I own that. That's our sort of personal piece. So does my business partner. Our SPV, we share 50-50. And then we have different investment stakes that are done through that. But the ownership, depends on how we do it. The ownership comes back to us in terms of our shares. But
in terms of 50-50, like it's 50-50. So like there's no control, like no one, like normally it has to be like 51-49 so that someone can decide, in case you disagree.
Yep. No, I've been involved in these sort of conversations for years. I just think, do you know what? It's just how we work, right? Like I don't just make an easy decision to go into stuff with anybody, right? It's people I trust, so that it's like almost feels like family. So you're right, on a pragmatic level, someone should have the final voting right or whatever else. I tend to get that by default, just because my experience of different, I mean, my background is more of being CEO of companies, whereas his is more operational. So I tend to have that say, but it's not formal.
Got it. And like, are there any deals that you do privately that is not through the SPV?
I have, there's a couple, but that's normally where I'm the chairman of a company. So I've got 5% in a business where I'm the chairman of that business. That's gifted equity. It's part of my my sort of duty as being a non-exec director. So I've got a couple of those. Yeah.
What do you do as chairman?
Strategic advisory.
Okay.
Normally hold the team to account. So I get asked this a lot. I don't do a lot of it, but normally it's making sure that the governance of the business is there, both legally and financially. So I'll work with the accountants to make sure that any of the audited accounts are done properly and things like that. But quite often I'm almost coaching the CEO or the leadership team of a business. So it's kind of has that role more than anything else. I'm mentoring, I'm sort of coaching on occasion. Sometimes I'm advising, sometimes I'm consulting, but I work on a model there where I'm retained as well. I get paid to be the chairman, but I'm also gifted a percentage of equity.
Got it. Okay, so last question. So what's your normal day-to-day life like?
I do a lot of this. Okay. Well, I launched my podcast, which did very well. Went to #1 in the UK and number 17 in the US charts, and has done extremely well since. And that's allowed me to meet people like you, form partnerships and friendships as well, off the back of that. So I do quite a lot of that. I talk about my journey and my story, because I think that can help people, particularly people who are stuck in jobs they hate and they want to try and do something different. So I like to think that I can help them with a different path. Then I work with some clients, like, as I said, in advisory capacity, but not very many. And then I have the businesses which I check in once a week on. And some of them need a little bit more help at times than others. So therefore, if one isn't performing, then I'll normally get a little bit more involved in that business. But then the rest of the time I'm looking for future deals. So I'm about to jump on a plane and go to the US for a month. So in July, looking at deals over there, and also seeing some clients in the US. And then the rest of the time I go running, I run marathons, I hang out with my family, and I just enjoy stuff.
Okay, so you do running, and do you have any morning routines or anything?
Yeah, I've run 67 marathons and 24 ultra marathons. So I'm big into endurance stuff. So a lot of my week is that. So I don't technically do any work before midday. So my mornings are mine. I get up. I always meditate every morning. I have a very simple but powerful sort of morning routine. So a bit of meditation, a bit of gratitude, a bit of visualization. And I drink a whole hell of a lot of water in the morning. And I fast pretty much up until midday. So I don't eat anything until lunchtime. I take my daughters to school. I always do that. It's one of the only times that I get to connect with them, because the days are busy and they're at school and whatever else. And night times I'm on calls quite a lot with people in the US. And then I always exercise for a couple of hours every morning. So I'll go to the gym for like 2 hours, and I'll do, a combination of cardio strength, but also just relaxation as well. So I do like a secondary meditation.
So you're normally at home, or you normally go to the office? Like you?
I don't have an office. I work straight from here. So what you're looking at now is, because I've had businesses all around the world. We've got offices in Baltimore and offices in London, but I never go to them, because I'm very much on planes. Everything's connected through technology.
Got it. All right.
I prefer that as well, to be honest.
Awesome. So what are your social media handles? What's your podcast? Do you have any webinar or
Oh
bonus
yeah,
you want to give?
if people are the podcast is called Scale Up Your Business. You can find that obviously on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. 170 odd episodes in now, some fantastic guests, people like Jay Abraham, John Lee Dumas, probably some of the people you've had on yours, I'm sure. But I talk about everything towards business scale up, acquisitions, and also the mindset behind it. I do a lot of stuff on how you can get yourself in the right headspace to be successful. So there's that. You can grab me on Instagram. It's at Nick C. Bradley is my handle there. And then the other place to find me is on Facebook. We have the Scale Up Your Business community. So you can join that. That's a free resource. We've got about 4,500 people, I think, in that at the moment. And then the website that we work from is called SUYB.global, where we talk about scale up. And if anyone's interested in things like, as I said, acquisition entrepreneurship, that's where they can find some more detail about our programs and stuff like that.
Awesome. I'll put all the links in the description of the YouTube video, and make sure you go and follow Nick. And thank you so much for being on the show. I know we ran over, but it was because it's so good. That's why I just kept asking you question after question.
That's great. That's great. Your questions, I know I've said this is the third time I'm going to give you praise again.
Thank you.
But your understanding of this stuff and your interest and your curiosity was first class. So I hope I provided adequate answers to your questions, and hopefully that people learned something today, because that's very important to me.
Thank you. Yes, I believe they'll definitely learn something whichever stage they're at. And thank you so much for being on the show.
Great. Thank you.